Peace, family. I'm coming at y'all again with another one. This is probably gonna be more like the secret relationship between African Americans and Native Americans. In this one, I know sometime around last year, I think maybe September last year, you had the Cherokee freedmen win a lawsuit against the United States, well, against the Cherokee Nation for tribal citizenship, but they went through the United States. We're gonna go and give a little backdrop of what the Treaty of 1866 actually is, because in the Treaty of 1866, it was something that followed the Civil War, and it was the first time that you could actually see black people in certain environments gaining supposedly recognized freedom. So with the Treaty of 1866, it had the five civilized tribes, which was the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Seminole, the Chickasaw, and the Creek. It took all five of those nations, which they called the civilized tribes, and forced them into a treaty agreement because these five nations actually allied with the Confederacy against the United States. And basically, when you would find the treaties with the United States, your end of the treaty was you couldn't basically war against the United States, which they did, and it voided. It's it's good for the Europeans to say this, but it voided out all of the treaties into the Treaty of 1866. They were starting fresh. But in this Treaty of 1866, we go to Article 9 of the treaty, and it says, they further agreed that all freemen who have been liberated by voluntary acts of their former owners or by law, as well as all free colored persons who were in the country at the commencement of the rebellion, shall have rights of all native Cherokee. So we're gonna go into what these Cherokee rights are, though. But the thing that we have to look at in the Treaty of 1866, Article 9, it was two statuses in that treaty. It was for freedmen who were basically had an owner, and you had free colored persons, freedmen and free colored persons. So we gotta look at these two groups because both of them gain all rights as Native Cherokee, as Native Choctaw, as Native Seminoles, as Native Chickasaw, as Native Creeks. Out of all five of those tribes have a treaty of 1866 with the exact same language. So all of their supposedly free people or free colored persons in their freedmen, they gain tribal rights. In uh from where I'm coming from with it, I don't see how they're trying to make the argument basically between the Cherokee government because the treaty says that you should have rights as a native Cherokee. It don't say that you would have rights that the native Cherokee have within his government because that's what they made it about. And they made it an argument where if the freedmen have tribal status within the Cherokee government, not do the freedmen have basically rights to self determination and self autonomy. That's the real agenda. Because even when we was around these people with the Seminoles, we had our own structures, which was better than their system. And then the red people who was with us, they had their own little separate things. So we really weren't just in a equal open society. You could do your research on the Seminoles. The Seminoles had better houses, better food, better clothing, and then you could go up amongst the people where they was calling those people freedmen too, freedmen and runaways and stuff like that. But when you go up into the so-called red men, red Seminoles, they wasn't living as good as them people. But back to I'm dealing with the Cherokee now because that's the people who was in the main lawsuit. But they said by 1922, half of the Cherokee were freemen and their descendants, and this was said by John Swanson. So Swanson, they had half of the Cherokee tribe in 1922 were freedmen and their descendants. So they're not even talking about the free color persons because the way that they're trying to spin it is that the only reason black people was in those tribes was because of slavery that took place in those tribes. And we can't get away from the fact that official government document, official treaty, gave native rights as a native to the freedmen in the tribes and the free colored persons in the tribes. But the rights that these people would have these people actually have is they have free health care. They have the ability to set up their own tribal clinic, which uh, which composes of free medical prescriptions. They can go in and get their prescriptions for free, and they can also get free glasses. They get access to scholarship money at a higher level than African Americans get it. But if they want to go into any type of educational background into working in the casinos, they get a full ride scholarship for basically going to go learn something to go work in the casinos. They get rights to casinos. They had, and this was taken in 2012, but it was grossing 28 billion annually. Cherokee casinos, and they have, which is a structure that creates jobs for them. But through their tribal structure, they citizens have first dibs on any jobs that come up. They also have rights to their own license plates, which obviously mean that they're under their own jurisdiction. They enter into their own court system. They have their own identification organization, which is respected by a foreign government. They have rights to a tribal government. They also tax free, and we know for a fact that these people are tax free because we can go into the founding documents of the United States, the Constitution. Give me 1 second while I'm going to this constitutional. Uh, it's the Three-Fifth Compromise. A lot of people only focus on the Three-Fifth Compromise, but the Three-Fifth Compromise is found Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution, and it reads, representative and direct taxes shall be apportioned amongst several states which may be included within the Union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, what they're talking about Europeans, including those bound to service for 10 terms of years, excluding Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all other persons. So my focus is not the 3/5 of all other persons, which we can get into that what that is actually talking about, just counting 3 out of every 5 blacks that you see. But going to the Indians not taxed, the Indians not taxed is important because they wasn't counted as a part of the population because they was their own sovereign body going back to the founding of the Constitution. They wasn't taxed and they still not taxed. And if they tell you they are, if they're allowing their stuff to be taxed, they're being duped. But you have a right to not be taxed because that's a system that's set up through the Constitution, which is the supreme document of the land. It don't get no higher than that. But we also talked about the casinos annual what they're making, but they have some that do like a gaming revenue where they pay out to their members. And they have some members that were taking in 30,000 a month. You have a right to indigenous medicine, medicines that your ancestors would have had that you can prove have healing properties or even ritualistic properties amongst your people. You have a right to access that. You also have a right to indigenous media. So it's supposed to be systems set up for indigenous people to be able to grab the media. And when you're telling your story, I said this before, YouTube can't block you from telling your story because not in violating your human rights, your indigenous rights, and your constitutional rights that you have here because they don't want you to get the message out about your people being indigenous. And you also have a right to ancestral lands. So if you can prove that your people was on this land, it's either you're going to have some type of compensation coming to you or them people going to have to kick rocks. But I just wanted to go in on the Treaty of 1866 and show you that it's not, I haven't found any law for African Americans where the law specifically said African Americans this, African Americans that. We doing this for black people. We doing that. It just don't exist. Any right that will come to the black family will come along with everybody else. They're not gonna signal black people out and make rights for them. But with these early treaties, when we find out who these people are and what these people were doing at the time, we can see why we have freedmen in these tribes and we also have free colored persons. I hold the belief that when black people was in colonial America, they wasn't citizens. They couldn't carry arms. They couldn't vote. What proof do anybody have other than hearsay that these people in early America were citizens of the United States, even the free ones, even the free ones in the North? So we have to ask ourselves, okay, if you got random black people basically living off to themselves, let's say in the woods, they outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, they doing their own thing. So they said who were in the country, who was basically in the Cherokee country at the time. You have freemen who have been liberated by voluntary act of their former owners or by the law, as well as all free colored persons who were in the country at the commencement of the rebellion. The rebellion was a civil war. So the free colored persons was getting the native rights. That's why we gotta focus on who these people was. When people trying to take you all the way across the water, we can do that once we unify. What we gotta do is find out these laws that affected us, but because what they was doing administratively was when you was coming in and you was looking any type of black, you was only labeled as black. It don't matter if you had tribal citizenship or not. They started adjusting their documentation to make anybody black basically automatically come from Africa. And I'm not saying they never been ancestry never came from Africa, but they're trying to say that you came over here only as a slave, and that's just not factual by any means. It's basically administrative genocide because they writing people out of history. They made up the one drop blood, and I see people all the time saying that how do you know that's the same type of black person? I'm like, bro, how did the European know, the European colonists know it was the same type of black person? He seen a black person, he snatched them up, and he made them a slave. He didn't go and say, oh man, let me not enslave you, because you're not the type of black person I'm looking for.